What's up guys, I'm Dunmere, top 100 Overwatch player, and I'm going to tell you guys how to play Cassidy in this guide. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what changed between the Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2 versions of Cassidy, and then I'm going to go through a general how to play for the character, and then finally I'm going to go give you guys some tips and some specifics and show you guys what that looks like in action by going over some gameplay from a professional Overwatch League player who played for the San Francisco Shock, IDDQD. So, jumping right into it, what changed? The first and absolutely most monumental change that Cassidy got was that his flashbang was traded out for this ability you're about to see right here, Magnetic Grenade. So as you can see, it no longer stuns and just deals damage. It's essentially a homing grenade that can deal up to 131 damage. So it's definitely not as powerful as what he used to have, but still gives him some capabilities. We'll go over more in a second about what exactly this all does, but it's just completely different from what he used to have. Like I said, it's a homing grenade, so it chases enemies down when you throw it nearby them. It sticks to them and explodes for a chunk of damage. So, second thing that got changed was he now has a 50% damage reduction when he's rolling, which is pretty substantial. And it gives him a sort of like tankiness that he lost from not having the flashbang anymore. So that's useful for sure and is a very good ability overall. The second to last thing that changed was the secondary fire rate. So his Fan the Hammer was buffed by 7.5% for his fire rate. So you fire that 7.5% faster. Not a huge buff, but still a buff nonetheless. The last thing that changed was how his Deadeye works. His Deadeye now gives him a 40% damage resistance while using it, which bumps his effective HP from 225 to 315, which is a lot. That's actually quite a hefty buff on that ability. Assumably that's because you don't have like an off tank to take care of you when you're using the ult like you did before, but that's what got changed with that. They also made it so the damage buildup for it goes from 130 damage for the first 2 seconds and then up to 260 damage for the remainder of time. The duration of it is up to 7 seconds now instead of 6, so you can hold it a little bit longer, but they did make it cost 10% more ultimate charge to get. So overall a buff, but a little bit of nerf going in there too. So what actually changed though for Cassidy's playstyle? Cassidy's biggest playstyle change has to do with the flashbang, or lack thereof, like we were talking about. So instead of having this ability to just be like this unkillable demon that you couldn't kill ever, you are now a lot more vulnerable. As you can see in this gameplay clip right there, he didn't have the ability to just kind of flash something that jumped onto him or flash any target that's nearby him and get a guaranteed like kill on them if they're squishy, or a guaranteed way to protect himself if they're not. So he doesn't have that anymore. So he's not capable of bowling dive tanks, whereas before, like, you couldn't dive into a Cassidy if you were playing Wrecking Ball because you just take so much damage with the stun into fire, into Fan the Hammer, into roll, into Fan the Hammer. He doesn't have that capability anymore. So you don't have to be like, you have to be a lot more wary of being dove, essentially, and just understanding that you don't have this raw power. You also don't have the ability to like guarantee yourself a kill when you're flanking. You kind of can with the way that the magnetic grenade works, but like, for example, in this gameplay clip, when he's on the flank, he can't just fan the hammer, he can't flash something, fan the hammer, and then kill them and die and just guarantee at least he's going to be trading his life for someone else's, you know, which would be advantageous if you're doing on like the enemy Ana or something like that. Can't do that anymore. So you're also not capable of just like pushing onto an enemy Reinhardt, for example, and just bullying them. Like before, you could roll onto them and flash them and then they just die all the time. You know, it was kind of rough for the tank players, but these are the changes, right? However, you still have your very powerful primary fire, so you can still two-shot anything that has up to 250 HP. You still have that. You did get a new burst combo, so you still have the kind of like burst capacity to just get a one-shot combo on something. For example, if he sneaks around here, hits a Lucio with this, and then primary fires him, it'll do 201 damage. So it'll kill. Obviously, you can get a little bit of healing during that time frame, so usually they're gonna survive if they're getting healed at all and they haven't taken any other damage. But it does give you the same sort of capability to get this sort of flank guaranteed kill on something. And if you do click on them right as the magnetic grenade goes off, it will one-shot anything that's 200 HP for sure. So you can do that too. Because there's no secondary tank for Cassidy to protect it, he's more vulnerable to being dove in a way. Like as you saw at the beginning of the gameplay when he was playing against the Genji, because he didn't have like a diva to turn and peel him, or he didn't have like a secondary tank that's like whole job is that to peel for him and take care of him. you end up losing your life in situations like that. But since you also don't have to play against that, when you're flanking people, you are a lot more free to just frag out. So, like I said, the main fundamentals are the same, but the biggest difference is you don't have this giant ball of death that you can toss at people and guarantee a stun. So you can't play quite as risky. You have to be more intelligent about what you're doing with your positioning and stuff like that. All right, moving on to how to play Cassidy. Cassidy plays as a sort of an enforcer, is like how I describe it. He's tankier than other DPS characters, but with his extra 25 HP and the magnetic grenade and his powerful damage threat and the roll. So you have the ability to like walk up to somebody, bully equally HP characters to you, have a little bit of extra HP to survive and roll away, and just this constant powerful primary fire to threaten anything within like your effective range. So it does have a lot of capability, and he's tankier, but he's not a tank, right? So you don't want to be like frontlining. You push and play off of resources. So when the enemy is low, you're really good at pushing into that, because with the fact that you have your roll and you have your magnetic grenade and just this really solid damage, you can punish enemies who are low HP, and you still have the resources to back up if you go too far, and or push even further aggressively in with your roll and get more ammo, because when you roll, you reload. So that's kind of what you're playing based off of. So for example, like when you're pushing into the fight, if the enemy is starting to take a lot of damage, the enemy is looking like they are not able to fight against you well, that's the point where Cassidy as an enforcer character can push into that, because then it's level in the sort of tankiness that he has compared to them, but he also has the powerful primary fire damage, and like I talked about, these other abilities to do more damage or escape, to make that really beefy and let him just absolutely burn people to death. So that's the main way that you play this character. And he is very consistent overall, just with the main good primary fire damage. So it's not like he's only playing for this stuff, but he really thrives in these situations too. So because you're really playing off of these sort of push and pull advantages, so when you have an advantage, you push into it. When the enemy has an advantage, you kite away from it and back up. You really want to be careful with wasting your magnetic grenade and especially your roll. They are on moderately low cooldown, so it's not like, you can never use them. But having the ability to push in with your roll when you need it or back away with it is really, really, really valuable. And having the ability to toss your magnetic grenade on like a tank that's pushing too far into you when you need it is very good. However, if you need to use either of these two to secure a kill, that's fine, and just use them. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you guys not to use a cooldown if it's going to guarantee you a kill, because this game, even more so than Overwatch 1, is about fragging and securing kills. So for the ultimate, it's not one of the best ones in the game, to be completely honest, and it's not really Cassidy's strongest ability, but it did receive some solid buffs. So you're, like I talked about before, how you have 315 effective HP now. You can use it a lot more aggressively. The best way to use it is to zone the enemy. So for example, like as the enemy's pushing into you, or you want to push into an area, you have like your Zarya, your Diva, your Reinhardt, give you a little bit of shielding to let you push aggressively into the enemy team, and use it to force the enemy out and maybe get some kills, and then have your team have a positional advantage because of that. But more realistically, it's going to look like you just popping it in the middle of the fight like this, when the enemy's kind of overextending, or you aren't like capable of being killed. Like right here, I won't get to in a moment, but right here, there's not something that's going to kill him. So for example, if he's playing, it's like a Widowmaker or a Sojourn that can just look straight at him, there's nothing threatening them, you don't want to use it, right? But using it in situations when there's not something that's really, really threatening you, you can get a decent value out of it, because you have that 40% extra tankiness. You can also use it to just have a free reload, because it does automatically reload. So if you ult and then you immediately use it to cancel, you'll have your reload back. So if you're going to die because you can't reload in time because you don't have your roll also, then you can use that, but that's kind of like a more advanced version of it. All right guys, now it's time for me to go through some actual gameplay of IDD Cuties and talk about what you should be doing on Cassidy and all the little tricks he does, and talk about general stuff too. So you always want to be playing on the high ground if you can. It gives you a really powerful ability to control the fight, essentially, because when you are taking too much damage, you can just kite back, just like this. Starts taking too much damage from the Soldier 76, he backs up, the Soldier 76 can't see him anymore, and he's able to just regen his health. So it lets you control that, whereas the Soldier 76 can't do that in the position that he's in right now. So he has to get the help from his Kiriko, has to get the help from his Zarya with the bubble. Meanwhile, IDD here can just back up and is fine. So always be looking for that. Here you're gonna see a little bit of the Enforcer stuff I talked about. Obviously, like, the fight's totally won for his team, but when they are low, he drops onto the Zarya, pushes her, and helps to enforce the win, essentially. But realistically, that's gonna look more like a neutral situation, him pushing in when the enemy's low resources and not just like they've already lost 3 people on the enemy team. Something that Cassidy is also very good at and should be doing, because has a role that's like also reduces damage but lets him move rapidly to his team, he should be playing about a roll away from his team. It gives him better sightlines on the enemies, so if they're trying to hide behind a certain form of cover, they won't be able to be hidden from him in certain situations, so he can get nice little picks on them. And because you have the safety of your extra HP and your roll, the damage reduction from it, you can dash back and get to your team. You should always be looking to do that. I'll try and show it when it's more of like a neutral situation. Might end up showing up on the next map I'll show after this one, because this one's mainly about playing a defensive high ground positioning. But you should always be trying to do that sort of stuff. Like, you start off the fight essentially looking to just burn the enemy, essentially. It's kind of that simple. Play from a good high ground position, play from a good angle. When you're on the high ground, you're kind of chill to just sit there. If you're on a neutral level playing with the enemy, then you kind of want to start angling off to the side on them. But you start fragging them, and whether you get them low or the enemy gets them low or your teammates get them low, that's when you'd be looking to push them after that. Now, if you just happen to two-shot like a couple of them, like 2 enemies, the fight's over and you've already won. You've won before you had to push in and enforce them. And that's why Cassidy's a really solid pick in general, just because of the fact that you can two-shot. Granted, he's being mercy damage boosted, so it's extending his effective range a little bit, but you can two-shot anything that has 250 HP in this game. 250 HP or less. So very powerful. And so what you're also going to see him doing is holding his magnetic grenade until something dives on him. Obviously, he's a little bit out of the range of it, but having the extra 131 damage can help you get a fight win. Granted, he went a little bit too far, like I talked about. Like, he's not really like one roll away from his team at this point. He ends up getting focused out. He ends up expecting to be able to tank against that. Kind of just a little bit of a misinterpretation of that, but overextends and dies there. So you're going to probably see a little bit more of a neutral position unless he gets killed by the soldier. Again, he's immediately going to the high ground. Even if it's not like a super massive high ground, it is an advantage. And the enemy diva knows that and is trying to fight for that. So there you can see that little exchange going on. Old Cassidy would have been able to stop this. Old Cassidy would have been able to flash right at his, like, the staircase here, and it would have hit the Genji, and then the Genji might not have been able to kill through it. And that's part of what Cassidy's gotten a lot weaker on. Like, Cassidy's definitely weaker overall now in this version of Overwatch than in Overwatch 2. It is pretty substantial, to be honest, but not so substantial that you can't play the character, because other characters did get nerfed too. Because, like I said, he still has a lot of what he had. It's just not this sort of like, I get to bully you out of any position because I have a really, really powerful stun ability. Like, as you can see here, you can still hold this. Again, fighting for a high ground. Hold this and just pump out damage. You are always going to want to be careful about things that can jump onto you, though. And that's why I'm talking a lot about holding your cooldowns. Having the ability to roll away is really, really good. And so if you don't have that, you're not holding on to that, you're going to be punished in situations that you wouldn't be otherwise if you'd had it. So, like getting dove by Genji, because Genji is so powerful right now, because there's not a second tank to help take care of things that are getting dove onto. Genji got a huge just indirect buff. But when he's diving onto targets and completely stopping them from like angling too far away, that's what Genji's really, really good at, and that's something you have to watch as Cassidy. Like, if you do happen to hit your magnetic grenade and then roll, bait their like, shoot them, or bait their deflect and then shoot them, yeah, you're going to beat a Genji, but the Genji still has the advantage in that matchup just because he has the ability to use his deflect and then cancel it right afterwards. So you're also going to see a high noon usage here. It is the one where it's just mainly for damage. Like when the fight starts getting wild, like basically right here, even though there is a Kiriko ultimate up, he anticipates that there's enemies who can't escape from it. Right here, he's like, okay, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to zone them away from this Kiriko ultimate, so I'm trading my Cassidy ult for the Kiriko ultimate, which is a good trade, or they're not going to be able to back up and they're going to die. But I also don't think I can die in this process. So he's holding it. The Soldier 76 ends up flanking onto him, and because of this extra tankiness, I'll show you guys again. Because of this extra tankiness, I can't back up for some reason. Because of this extra tankiness, he's able to live through it. So that's what you have to think of. Now also, when you're playing against like a diva or something, you have to try and hold it until the diva's not using her defense matrix anymore. But ends up getting both the diva and the Soldier 76 out of it. So good play on his part. But then a Genji comes in, rolls his team. That wasn't his fault. He made a good play. All right, guys, for this segment, I'm going to talk some more about positioning, talk about cooldown usage, and then talk about that enforcer example that I've been discussing, and show you guys what that looks like. So when you walk out here in the first fight, and in general, there's basically three places you can go to as a Cassidy. You can go play for the very conservative option, sitting here in the back, or you can go for a more short little off-angle flank, or you can go all the way on the right side of the map. That's a lot more aggressive. But he chooses to play within his team to start with. Thought about going on the left side, but ends up playing for the more conservative option. And then as soon as his team's just winning the fight, he pushes in. And that is a little bit of the enforcer stuff that I talked about. When you do see an opportunity, like when an enemy player dies, that's kind of your trigger to push in and ensure that your team wins that fight. Because there's times where they won't, unless they have that damage backing them up to secure it. So he does end up going too far here and getting picked, but that's just kind of a little bit of a misplay here. Nothing too crazy about that portion. But like as I said, you basically want to start off the fight being in a neutral position, and then you look for opportunities, whether that's just pressing W when your team gets a kill on something, or angling off onto the left side, right side a little bit, based on like depending on how aggressive you can go. So he does something here that seems like a very micro mistake, but it ends up costing him his life. So when you play like right on this corner here, you're controlling the angle and only dealing with one angle. So right now there's only the Sojourn here that can shoot at him. And so he shoots at the Sojourn, Sojourn shoots him, and that's that. And if he wants to and he takes too much damage, he can hide behind this corner. But what he does is he walks out in front of the corner, so now he's like a foot or two in front of the corner. So now he's taking damage from the Sojourn, but then he's also taking damage from the side by the Genji. And so the Genji is able to see him, dive him, and kill him. So if he was just playing a little bit further back, it makes all the difference in that. Like it seems kind of, you know, nitpicky, but it's a big deal. Just his sort of micro positioning. And that's why like when you're playing against really high level players too, having to make these decisions constantly all the time that you get punished for is a big deal. And that's why you see even really good players still make mistakes. So that's how that goes. Pushing back into this though, team's already won the fight. Like I said, he starts pushing up a little bit to match where his team is, but then he's starting to notice that the enemy team is getting a lot more resource advantage. So right here you see them pushing out and he's like, oh, my team just ulted my team to this stuff. Like that's two ults his team basically just wasted, and so he's like, okay, time to dip, you know. So he backs up, now he's using the corner properly, and you're going to see him take advantage of his positioning and basically being a Cassidy. Because Cassidy has a role, you can control a lot of engages on you. Assuming he already used his role or didn't have it, this Genji might have been able to dash and kill him. But because he had that, in addition to the Kiriko ultimate, he could escape. And so that's basically what you can do a lot on Cassidy that you can't do on some other characters. Like for example, if you're a Widowmaker and something dives you, you have to hook onto something and then it slowly pulls you there. Versus with Cassidy, you could just instantly roll away. And so your positioning is good to start with. Having that little bit of an extra movement to get you away is really, really powerful. And so you don't want to waste it. So like sometimes people use their rolls as a reload, and that's okay if you're not going to be dove at all. But if you are, then it's rough. Here we're going to see another example of the whole enforcer concept. You're going to see him initiating this fight by using his ultimate as like a zoning ultimate. the first way I talked about it, where the enemy team jumps in, he ults just to keep them away because he doesn't want them to have that sort of push advantage. Doesn't really get anything out of it. Like, he basically zoned the whole Sojourn ult with it. Sojourn's ulting, but doesn't get the advantage from it because he gets bubbled by his Winston and he's ulting. And so then from here, like right when this goes off, and then he pumps damage into the Roadhog's face, and the Roadhog misses his hook, that's when this is his trigger to go in. Like right when this goes off, he's like, okay, they don't have their hook, they don't have this, they don't have these resources, it's time for me to push in and enforce this. So he pushes in, pumping damage into the Roadhog, sees the Genji go too far, hits him with the combo, and then that's the sort of enforcement. He does end up backing up after that because he doesn't have as many of his cooldowns, and it already seems like his team's absolutely rolling, but right at this situation in the fight, it's an even fight. This makes it 4-5. The Roadhog death makes it 3-5, but then the Sojourn trades a kill into the Tracer. So if he hadn't killed that Genji, it would have been an even fight. And for example, the Genji might have had his blade back. There might have been some sort of option. He might have just dove onto him and killed him. Dove onto someone on his team and killed him, and they could have turned that fight. But because he pushed that aggression, and he caught hold of an opportunity and was like, okay, it's go time, press W, go in. He was able to secure the fight for them and basically do his part to guaranteeing that they win it. If you're looking for some more Overwatch 2 content, then make sure to check out these videos I have right here. Like I said, I'm a top 100 Overwatch player, so I have lots of videos and things to share with you guys.